Welcome to Recruiter Wins, your bite-sized 15-minute podcast with your host, Zach Gallinger. This is the show where every guest answers one simple question. Tell me about your biggest recruiting win. You'll hear everything from gut-wrenching candidate conversations to game-changing business development wins. Real stories with lessons you can actually use in your next search.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Recruiter Wins. My name is Zach Gallinger, and I'm the founder of Talent Hero Media, a digital marketing agency that works exclusively with recruiters. In this podcast, we sit down with a highly successful recruiting expert and ask them a single question. Tell me about your biggest recruiting win. Our guest today is George Santos, Managing Director and Head of Marketing at 180 Engineering. As its name suggests, 180 has focus on recruiting in the engineering industry. And based on my working relationship with George over the past few years, I would have no hesitation in saying that they are very good at what they do. Welcome to the show, George.
Hey, Zach, how are you?
I'm doing well. Good to talk to you again. And thanks for joining us. So I like to sort of just dive right in and just ask you that question. Tell me about your biggest recruiting win.
Yeah, what a question. I've been thinking about this all week, and there's been a lot of wins in the time that I've been here, but I think the single biggest one and the most vivid memory is my first placement. I think every recruiter remembers their first placement. That one really sets the tone for the chain of events that happens afterwards for me in terms of launching, a job into a career. And
how long ago was that first placement?
oh gosh, it'll be going on almost 12 years now.
All right. You've been in this for a while now.
A little bit. I've gotten some gray hairs and I've lost some on top, but I'm still in it. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let's hear the story.
Yeah. So when I joined 180 Engineering, I was just coming fresh off of retail. And, to be honest, I didn't know if recruiting was going to be for me or not. I've always been in sales, and in college, I didn't really know yet what I wanted. And so I took the job, and I understood recruiting as a concept and headhunting to some extent, but I really didn't know what was involved in it. And the first couple of weeks are tough. Any new recruiter will tell you. I mean, you're learning a lot, and then you're thrown in the fire essentially. And one of the first roles that I was sourcing for was for a software engineer for a casino gaming company. So it was a pretty technical position, niche type of software engineer. And it was just like, okay, here we go. There's what the job is. There's a job description, go at it. And, you're learning and you're doing at the same time. And it was such a vivid experience of just, okay, I'm going to call this person and I'm going to talk to them about their job. And I kind of understand what they're doing, but I really don't. And
was this a cold call? Sorry, it was like slow call. Yeah. That's very intimidating.
Yeah, I mean, to this day, right? I mean, these folks don't drop out of trees. So I'm calling people at work. I'm disrupting their day. So there's overcoming that. And then there's also just talking to them about something that they've been doing for decades, right? And
yeah,
I'm the one trying to somehow assess them if they're going to be good enough for this opportunity. So it was bizarre, and it was very out of body for me because I'm having this conversation with this engineer, one of the first ones, and I remember thinking like, this guy must think I'm an idiot. I don't know. Like, I don't know.
Right.
And I'm trying to go through the list of requirements. I'm trying to avoid yes or no questions. And, it was nice because that first phone call, I got through it and I'm like, that wasn't so bad. And there were several others. And I started to kind of notice that there was a couple of things that were similar in terms of what they were saying. So it gave me some material to ask some questions. And I think maybe a couple of weeks into the search, I got more comfortable. I started asking people, a little bit more about just, hey, am I phrasing this right? Or here's my understanding of this platform. Can you validate that's correct? And, I was really anxious about asking folks if I'm doing my job right, essentially.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah. They were so willing to go into the weeds with me about, their role and the technologies that they use that it was very exciting. And long story short, I found somebody and I submitted them and they got an interview. And the whole time, I remember still being very anxious at every stage, from the first interview to the second interview. And I'm trying to show my worth here in this process. And, they're talking to other principal engineers and software engineering managers and product managers and all these folks that are way above beyond my comprehension at this point, that I started thinking about what's something I could bring of value to this engagement to keep this person involved, to keep me involved in the process, and hopefully, secure that win, that first placement. And what I realized was that I really started listening to his questions, and his questions weren't so technical. His questions were really about the process and what to
Right.
expect, and who are these people, and what do you think they think of me? And that started kind of clicking on the light bulb that the value I bring, besides identifying folks, really was guiding them through this process that they're probably going to do a handful of times in their lifetime. People really only change jobs maybe 5, 6 times, in their lifetime, unless they're consultant or contractor. And I could speak to that. I observed the other recruiters. I was learning from, my environment, and a lot of it became, just showing people, hey, here's the things that we should be paying attention to in terms of what's important to the client, what's important to their environment. What do you think this one stakeholder values? What do you think, his or her questions are going to come from? And then the last piece was just shepherding the human behind the title. And I remember this person, he was a very loyal employee. He was great, he was a hard worker, but he just wasn't going to be able to advance to where he needed to be, and things weren't great around him, and this was the right opportunity, but I could sense fear and hesitation, and it was just making this change. And our conversations towards the end really became about, validating why he took the call in the first place, and what this change could mean for him, and what's exciting on the other end of getting past this moment of high anxiety for both of us at this point. But when the email came through from the client that he got the job offer, it was incredible, right? And I
Yeah.
remember
That's
vividly like pausing before calling him because I didn't want to seem like overexcited, and he was blown away. I could hear the pause in his voice when I told him, hey, you got the role, and this is what it is, and you got exactly what we were looking for. And, he got signed on. What's funny is he is still there at that position to this day. So I have
so
creeped on
12,
his link.
12 years later.
Yes, I definitely did creep on his LinkedIn. I've kept in touch, but he's still there to this day. And after that whole experience, it just made everything else, consumable to me in terms of like, okay, I can do this. I can talk to somebody, no matter their title, no matter their degree, because the thing that I know is this process and how this works and what people need to know to get through to this, this next step in their careers. I can bring that to the table. I may not know everything about, certain platforms or whatnot. I can know enough to get dangerous and to identify the right people. And people really do take value in that. They like that you're advocating, for them. And so that was the biggest win. I mean, that triggered everything else after it that came for me here.
That's a great story. And I sharing that. I mean, as someone who's never worked as a recruiter, I often find that, there's some elements of the job that are maybe lost on me. And I think, when I go on LinkedIn, I see recruiters posting about how great it is to, change someone's life. I think maybe sometimes I, might be a bit jaded and skeptical, but I think this story really does bring home that point. And like, I think that moment when you sort of told him and like hearing how happy he was, like, I think that really resonated with me. So I think that's, a very interesting, take on that
Yeah,
point.
I mean, our mission statement is, changing lives one placement at a time. And I'm right there with you, right? You see that a lot, and it could be kind of a marketing gimmick, but you really do. I mean, you have a profound impact. You can change the course of someone's life. You can change their career. You can uproot an entire family and move them across the nation for an opportunity. And, I think I've never lost sight of the significance of what we do because, again, you're only going to do this a handful of times in your life, and you got to trust the other person. And so I take that responsibility really highly here. And when we talk with our team, whether we're recruiting or even as ongoing development, we make sure people don't lose sight of the significance of what they're doing and why the details matter and what is the value that we bring to this. It isn't, matching keywords and pushing people through, into an inbox. It really is matchmaking and making sure this is a win-win-win across the board for everybody.
Right. Yep. That makes perfect sense. So, I try to keep this show to 15 minutes or less. And so I want to jump in. Probably only have time for one question, but I think it's kind of a big one. So I'd like to get your thoughts on this. So you mentioned, the value that you provide in this experience and as a recruiter in general is sort of guiding the candidate through the process. You mentioned, he had some fear and hesitation about potentially changing jobs. And so when you said that, it sort of struck me the idea of, can AI replace a recruiter? Right. And I'm sure you have some thoughts on that. I mean, the current version of AI, I don't think can even remotely come close to doing that. And I'm not really sure whether a future version of AI in, at least in the near future is going to be able to do that either. So I'm curious, like how given sort of the mission and the value that you sort of take from guiding the candidate through the process, how do you view the role of AI, like where it is today, where it might be able to help in the future?
Yeah, I'm certainly not one of those AI naysayers. I mean, I love, a shiny new object and a new tool. And I think AI is going to be a great enhancement for our industry. I mean, folks were very scared when job postings went from the newspaper to job boards. And folks were scared when LinkedIn was going to replace recruiters. And those things never happen, right? They greatly enhance a recruiter's capability. I think AI will certainly accelerate, the enhancement. I think sourcing and some of the remedial admin tasks can finally go to the way of having AI handle that stuff. And it allows recruiters to do what they do best, which is that human to human connection. As I mentioned earlier, this is a big life change for somebody. I mean, buying a house, buying a car, getting married, those are big life steps, having a baby, right? And those are things that you often have to entrust some sort of professional, someone to kind of give you some wisdom through this highly anxious process. And changing jobs is the same thing, especially if you're making a big career move. If you're going from individual contributor to your first management position, there's going to be things that AI can certainly do in terms of identifying that individual, helping them critique their resume. When it comes down to it, though, in terms of the emotional intelligence needed, and then finally the courage to make that next big step, I don't think people are going to want to converse with a bot on that. I think, chat GTP is quickly replacing some folks' therapists, but you really, there's a lot of questions there in terms of, is this right for me? Am I making the right move? What do I say to my former employer? Is this normal? I think the is this normal question I get so much when we finally ask people like, hey, what's holding you back? I think you want the wisdom of someone who's been on that journey over and over again. Our CEO has a great analogy. He's like, we're like a Sherpa. Like we're taking people to Everest all the time, right? And so
Right.
the Sherpa is like the climb is like no big deal. But for the people who are on that expedition, it is a big deal, right? One misstep or something, they don't want to fall off the side of that mountain. So you want the advice of someone who's been up and down that summit. And that's, I think, our role, as good recruiters.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent answer. And I think, having used AI, and I've seen, I was reading a Reddit post, somebody was talking about how they got called by a AI screening tool, trying to, and like that's early in this process, right? Probably not where the person's really hit the fear and hesitation. And the bot, couldn't even really, have a conversation because it's sort of pre-programmed. If you ask a follow-up question, it's not really understanding. It kind of just can get stuck in a loop. So yeah, I think to take that next step, I think is something far off in the future, if at all possible. So that makes a lot of sense. Are you using any AI in the business today? Or at least still, yeah.
Certainly, yeah. Again, it's great for some of those admin tasks, and it's been great, as a proofreading tool. And the thing that with AI is it's a tool, right? It's not a replacement, and it does require still some human guidance and intervention in terms of making sure you're using it correctly. I think offloading something like that initial reach out is something that kind of really speaks against our values and our mission, right? We want there's a very much a very human element to what we do. Even though it's technical recruiting, you're still dealing with people. And no matter the level, I mean, I'm talking from entry level college kids all the way up to senior directors stepping into their first VP role. There is that moment where everything is lined up, everything makes sense, they're ready to go, but they got to choose to take that next step. And it is so easy to fall back on what even if your previous employer or current employer is toxic and it's a terrible environment and there was a reason why you took a recruiter, you still got to build up the courage to take that step and say, okay, I'm going to try something new here. A lot of people appreciate knowing that there's someone there that they can speak to. I mean, I've had multiple folks talk to me about their offer before they even tell their spouse. They're calling me late at night, they're calling me early in the morning on their way to work, and oftentimes I'm not even advising at that point. I'm just really listening and I'm repeating back to what I heard and said, hey, how does this sound to you? And they go, oh, you're right. This is probably just cold feet. And then, they're off to the races to their next journey.
Excellent. So, I think we'll end things there. That's been a great story. And I really appreciate you taking the time to come speak with me today.
Yeah. Pleasure having, being on the conversation and, I got to say, Zach, you and your team have been amazing to work with. So I can't give you guys enough kudos out there. If anybody's interested, definitely reach out to Zach. It'll be well worth the time.
Well, thank you for the plug. We didn't plan that. I'll say. All right. Take it easy, George.
Take care, Zach. See ya.
Thanks for listening to Recruiter Wins. Please join us again when we ask our next recruiter one simple question. Tell me about your biggest recruiting win.